Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon also. My name is Katarina Albuquerque. I'm the CEO of Sanitation and Water for All. And welcome to this webinar. I see the number of participants quickly increasing, so I will give us all a very few minutes in order, or seconds, in order for the numbers to stabilize, and then we shall start the discussion. As we wait, I would like to draw your attention to the next slide, Larissa, please, and to some quick housekeeping matters. The translation interpretation for this webinar is offered, so please click on the language you would like to listen to. There is an icon with the world on the right-hand side, lower right-hand side of your screen. If you want to engage in the chat, please introduce yourself so that we know who you are and how many people, countries, organizations are attending this webinar today. And please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar in the chat. Please select everyone, otherwise not everyone will see your questions and comments. Kindly also mute yourself when you are not speaking. And now in French. Je pense. Exactement. L'interprétation est proposée pour ce séminaire. Veuillez cliquer sur la langue que vous souhaitez écouter en cliquant sur le globe terrestre qui est au-dessous de votre écran à droite. Veuillez aussi, s'il vous plaît, vous présenter dans le chat. N'hésitez pas à y poser des questions tout au long du webinaire. Mais veuillez sélectionner tout le monde ou everyone en anglais, si vous voulez, pour que tout le monde puisse voir, lire vos commentaires. Finalement, pour les orateurs, veuillez couper le son lorsque vous ne parlez pas. Okay. So I'm slowly starting so that we don't lose more time. I'm seeing more people joining, but let's indeed start. So I will be your moderator for today. And as I said, my name is Katarina. Somebody is saying that the interpretation into English was not working while I was speaking in French. So maybe somebody could look into that. Thank you for that message and for that important feedback. For the time being, I will be speaking in English, but for the panel discussion, indeed, there will be some French. So it would be good to look into that. So a quick overview over the agenda, which will be divided in 4 parts. First, a framing presentation by Ms. Nita Pocrel, who is the Chief of the Water Sector Group in the Asian Development Bank, followed by a panel discussion between Madame Hélène Bragory, who is the Director of Rural Sanitation at the Ministry of Sanitation of the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, and Mr. Amit Singh, who is the Water, Environment and Climate Resilient Planner at the Regional Pacific NDC Hub. Then the panel discussion will be followed by a session of questions and answers. And finally, we will close with closing remarks from Mr. Paul Deverell, the Senior WASH Advisor at FCDO. Next slide, please. Okay, very good. Give me just 1 second. As you know, today we come together with a sense of purpose, and I would also suggest a sense of urgency. As a sector, we have a goal of universal access to water, sanitation and hygiene by 2030. And as the world, we have made promises to deliver on the entire SDG agenda. And the COVID pandemic and the consequent economic fallout have created serious setbacks. And we all know the most recent data. A quadrupling of progress is needed worldwide if we are to meet our intentions, our commitments of universal access to water, sanitation, and hygiene by 2030. And we also know that for low-income countries, the rate of progress has to be even higher, significantly higher. And it is with this determination to accelerate our progress that we convene this webinar entitled, as you have seen, Building Forward Better, Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Solutions for Sustainable Recovery from the Triple Crisis. As you know, this discussion is part of the preparatory process for the upcoming Sector Ministers Meeting set for May 18 and 19 in Jakarta, Indonesia. The focus of the SMM reflects our understanding that our efforts in reaching universal access to water, to sanitation, and to hygiene must go hand in hand with the efforts of our partners in other sectors. Evidence shows that investments in water and sanitation contribute to public health outcomes, to economic development, and overall prosperity. Research published by WaterAid has shown that every dollar invested in water, sanitation, and hygiene could generate up to a $21 return. Every dollar invested in water and sanitation brings a fourfold return in health, economic, and educational outcomes. $1 spent on flood resistance can avert $62 in costs from worsening floods. Global economic analyses show that green spending, including on resilient water and sanitation, can secure both greater growth and a greener future. And in addition to these economic and environmental returns, we all know that the social returns and benefits of investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene are, as you all know, immense. Recognizing these interlinkages, this upcoming Sector Ministers Meeting will, for the first time, be truly multi-sectoral, bringing together ministers of water, sanitation, and hygiene with their counterparts responsible for the environment, climate, health, and the economy. The meeting provides a critical opportunity to review water, sanitation, and hygiene-related policies and commitments, as well as ensure that climate, health, and economic recovery considerations are well integrated into those same commitments. With a robust preparatory process already underway, we seek to support you as SWA partners in defining priority actions and commitments through the mutual accountability mechanism. You will be creating together as stakeholders an opportunity for collective reflection, not just on the status of water, sanitation, and hygiene in your country, but also on how that relates to your country's commitments on climate, on health, and also on economic recovery and development. To demonstrate how water, sanitation, and hygiene can contribute to those commitments and can also benefit from them, the SMM is a key stepping stone to generate the tidal wave of momentum that we need in order to reach our 2030 goals. Now, back to this webinar and to its focus. With all of this in mind, today's discussion will focus on two topics. One, the crucial role of water and sanitation to address the intertwined health, economic, and climate crisis that we are facing globally today, what we are calling the triple crisis, and secondly, the impact of this triple crisis on systems, on services, and on and also the solutions needed to ensure that the sector is not only protected, but also contributes to a healthy population as well as green and sustainable economic recovery. The SMM is our opportunity to focus attention on the importance of investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene to secure greater growth and a greener future. Let's use this moment to provide the evidence and experiences from your countries, from your organizations, where you are already putting in practice approaches that demonstrate the contributions of water, sanitation, and hygiene to the triple win. Okay, now, as I told you, I am handing over the floor to Ms. Nita Prokel, who is the Chief Water Sanitation and the Chief of the Water Sanitation and Hygiene at the Asian Development Bank. Until last evening, Nita was planning to join us in person. Unfortunately, she had to cancel due to an emergency on her side, but she was generous and kind enough to record the video, which we will now show. Let me also tell you that Mr. Christian Valda, who works in Nita's team, has joined us today and is here with us. Thank you, Christian, for being here today. And dear Secretariat colleagues, please now show us Nita's video.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are joining us today. It is my pleasure to represent the Asian Development Bank at this preparatory meeting of the Sector Ministers Meeting organized by Sanitation and Water for All. Let me start by thanking our colleagues at the SWA for giving us this opportunity. My name is Nita Pokrel. I am the Chief of Water Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has provided us with a harsh reminder that strengthening water and sanitation services and investing in hygiene behavior change communication are critical strategies for strengthening the prevention of and response to the pandemic such as the one we have just faced. They are also among the most cost-effective strategies. As we have witnessed in the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic is far more than just a health crisis. It has had significant socio-economic impacts, and it continues to have it in all our developing member countries. Safely managed wash services are critical to support the sustainable recovery from this pandemic and also contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, goals that we need to keep in the front and center of what we do towards our green recovery. It is the role of development bank like us to be at the forefront to remind our clients, the policymakers of our developing member countries such as yourselves, that creating assets and infrastructure alone is just not enough. These interventions must be accompanied by a broader enabling environment, capacity building, institutional strengthening, behavior change communication, and sector coordination. Achieving the SDG 6 targets is simply impossible without ensuring inclusive governance, ensuring policies are there for inclusive governance, frameworks, and capacities. And these are critical to enable and sustain good water and sanitation services. Achieving SDG 6 targets is also impossible without recognizing that safely water and sanitation is the first and foremost issue linked with behavioral change. As we have learned during this pandemic, water supply and sanitation infrastructure and systems alone are not enough, and providing capital cost to provide these services are not enough to bring about the intended health improvements and socioeconomic changes. The COVID-19 pandemic has also had the most devastating effects on the poorest and the most vulnerable of our society and the countries that are not geared up to have the behavioral change, the qualities for the poor set up. The pandemic has highlighted this that there is persistent inequality in water and sanitation access and has the potential to further exacerbate these long-standing disparities when pandemics hit. 2 months after the COVID-19 outbreak was declared as a global pandemic, ADB joined world leaders and heads of international organizations in the call for action on COVID-19 to make water, sanitation, and hygiene available to everyone, and eliminating inequalities to leave no one behind, with a special emphasis on those most vulnerable to COVID-19, the poorest in our societies. It is precisely for these reasons that ADB supports our developing member countries in Asia and the Pacific to strengthen the enabling environment so these can be sustained. The knowledge and capacities for preparedness of pandemics such as these, management, resilience, and sustainable recovery. So when we talk about building back better or building forward better, then these are at the front and back of our strategies moving forward. We are bringing attention to the critical importance of water and sanitation and hygiene as the first line of defense against pandemics such as COVID-19. We are promoting better integration of WASH and health approaches into all our ADB supported projects in our developing member countries to prevent, prepare for, and respond to similar pandemics, water and sanitation related emergencies, and water-related and climate-related disasters. There are many examples of this work in ADB. We have supported the development of evidence-based WASH plus health behavior change communication strategies in Nepal, Pakistan, the Philippines, Uzbekistan, that are integrated with our urban and water sector investment projects. In the Pacific countries with no national WASH policy or formalized governance structure, the pandemic has provided momentum towards developing a national WASH framework. ADB is committed to support this effort in the Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, and other Pacific Island countries. In Bangladesh, our ADB-supported urban primary health care center services and delivery project supports city and municipal health departments to reorganize and integrate with other climate-sensitive subsectors such as water, sanitation, and waste management, so it can provide a holistic public health outcome. Resilience to future crises depends on actions taken now. Water is the primary medium through which we feel the impacts of climate change. The role of water sector in adapting to climate change is extremely important. Therefore, we must lead with this realization in mind and deepen our efforts towards mainstreaming water resilience or resilience in all our policies, our water and sanitation services and investments. At ADB, we are launching an initiative called Are You Water Resilient, which is targeted towards all water service providers and resource managers on the ground. We are also recently completed a dedicated guidance note on mainstreaming water resilience in the region. As this meeting theme has reminded us, the role of sector policy makers such as yourselves is extremely important when we are gearing up to face these triple challenges to build back better: climate change, economic recovery, and health. ADB is deeply committed to continuing our support to our developing member countries in this recovery, so we can realize the new normal for a resilient, inclusive, and equitable WASH sector in our region. We wish you all the best at this meeting, and we ensure that we will work with you in achieving these goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Nita and to the colleagues at the IADB. Christian, please convey to Nita our deep thanks. intervention, for the points that she made, for the examples that she gave, and for the way in which she made them in such a compelling manner. Thank you also for referring to the Global Leaders Call to Action that SWA launched at the beginning of the pandemic. And let me remind you that for those who didn't know it, and maybe many don't, that the first entity that signed it was the Asian Development Bank. So thank you so much for being at the forefront. Now the cherry on the top of the cake would be for the Asian Development Bank to become an SWA partner. Good. So as I announced, we have a panel discussion, and I will jump immediately into it. I already told you who the participants will be in this discussion. We are extremely thankful to them and honored to have them here. I'll jump immediately and ask Amit a question. Amit, the Pacific Islands are extremely vulnerable to climate change. We know that, right? And so are there water, sanitation, and hygiene services? I remember some years ago visiting Kiribati and Tuvalu precisely for those for those issues. And I remember how I understood the extreme vulnerability of the countries in the Pacific. The economic fallout from COVID protection measures, importantly restricting travel, has been very severe in your region. But even before the pandemic, many children and families across the Pacific faced significant challenges in accessing clean water, safe sanitation, a place to wash their hands. So can you tell us about the role these services play when designing recovery packages in the Pacific Islands? And are those packages also helping with bridging climate priorities established, for example, by the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs in your region? Over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Katrina. Hope you can hear me well.
Very well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll keep my video off due to broadband issues, but I'm ready to give my side of the contribution to the discussion. Again, Bula and greetings from Fiji. Thank you all, and thank you to Sanitation and Water for All for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I concur with the discussions so far and the discussions from Nita, and I agree that such discussions are critical and highlights the urgency of strategic WASH interventions and the need to integrate WASH whilst designing the recovery package, and in doing so identifying the strategic directions to build resilience to current crises we face. And to fortify the overall resilience of our people, and the sustainability of the WASH sector as a whole. To start off, I would say that WASH challenges in Pacific is unique. This uniqueness is of course related to our islands, its geography, its fragility, the natural vulnerability to climate change, and its limited resource, all contributing to various WASH challenges across different Pacific Island countries. As you have said, Katrina, many atoll island countries, many atoll island Pacific countries have limited reliable water resource, and this problem is aggravated by climate change. Similarly, sanitation also remains a challenge for several Pacific Island countries, particularly those that are rapidly urbanizing or having limited land area, for example, Kiribati, and Fiji, PNG, and so on. The region has seen some of the strongest storms in the southern hemisphere in recent years. For example, Fiji has experienced 2 Category 5 tropical cyclones, TC Winston in 2016 and TC Yasa in 2020, that left behind a trail of destruction and had enormous WASH implications. The recent volcanic eruption in Tonga also has dire consequences of WASH, with reports of water contamination across many outer islands, including the capital, Tongatapu. These events have occurred at a time while these countries are trying to navigate through the greatest health and climate crisis of our time, both with dire WASH requirements and consequences. For us in the region, as this disaster strike, as Nita has alluded earlier on, it usually manifests itself through water, often associated with too much water or too less water, or deteriorating water quality, or spatio-temporal availability of water. And in some part, water can be seen as the instrument of disasters like floods we experienced in Fiji and in Samoa, the droughts that affect Kiribati, Tuvalu, Tonga, Marshall Islands, and other nations. Or water can also be seen as a systematic solution for preventing and reducing impacts of or the recovery from natural disasters or pandemic. Having said that, it is evident that WASH plays a critical role when designing recovery packages in the Pacific Islands. And with current health and climate crisis, a careful integration of WASH within the recovery packages are critical and timely. For long, we have tried to address WASH issues in Pacific through technical savvy expert lens, and I think it's time for a shift towards more operational focus. Having said that, and considering the fact that each Pacific Island countries are different and unique given their national circumstances, their vulnerability to natural disasters, their ability to handle crisis, it is really important that we realign our approach, modality, and view things from an operational lens of Pacific Island countries. While doing this, there would be instances where project efficiency may be compromised, but delivering a couple of $1,000 worth of water project benefiting a few hundred people is as important as delivering a multi-million water project benefiting hundreds of thousands of people. At the end, what matters is the access to safe and reliable potable water. Similar notion is also applicable to sanitation projects. Delivering a WASH project in a remote Pacific Island country in the middle of the ocean is not an easy feat, and such considerations during designing recovery packages are critical. Water resource management and WASH has the ability to address the two global agenda, the 2015 Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the UNFCCC's 2015 Paris Agreement, along with the global sustainable development goals. As such, a careful thought, country context, and cross-sectoral coherent WASH interventions are critical not only for the recovery from the current multiple crises we are facing, but also to advance country obligations to our global agenda and goals. Whilst we are discussing this, I think it is also very important to mention that investments in WASH, and as Nita has already alluded, investments in WASH infrastructure alone should not be the focus of the recovery package. But as important are the policy actions, the enabling environment, the capacity and institutional strengthening, WASH regulations, standards, compliance, and WASH sector coordination. And this should form the key aspects of WASH whilst designing recovery packages, at least for this part of the region. On the second part of the question, Katrina, I would like to say the role of water and water-related activities, including WASH, in bridging the climate priorities established by the NDCs in the region. I would like to say that, like in many other parts of the world, the response to this climate and health calamities are not evolving at a similar pace across various countries. This is quite understandable, and as stated earlier, depends on the national circumstances of each country. Similar is the situation in the Pacific Island countries. It is, however, promising that we are now seeing water resource management is being prioritized and is making the transition from the national development plans, the national adaptation plans, and the national policies, and are starting to appear on the Pacific Island countries' NDCs. For example, Fiji's updated NDC under the adaptation section clearly states the comprehensive and integrated water resource management approach to conserving and enhancing productivity of its water resources and ensuring its prudent and equitable use. Similar narrative appears on the NDCs of other Pacific Island countries, such as Niue, Tonga, Vanuatu, Kiribati, and Nauru. Further, to give us an example of its actual implementation, the Republic of Nauru requested the support from the regional Pacific NDC hub to PI review its 2017 water and sanitation master plan to assess the suitability of the master plan's proposed water and sanitation infrastructural system. This work was undertaken by the NDC Hub through the partner SPC, namely Pacific Community, which is one of the partners of the NDC Hub, and others being the Global Green Growth Institute, GGI, GIZ, and the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, the SPREP, and delivered the PI review document in May last year, which has since been used by the country to further its water services aspirations and develop water and sanitation project for the country. The above example not only signals a shift by the Pacific Island countries towards exploring multiple frontiers to prioritize support for water sector, including WASH and water resource management, but also illustrates that water is key in bridging the climate and the Sendai agenda and achieving the sustainable development goals amongst the various calamities the Pacific Island countries face. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Amit, for everything you said. I think it was fascinating and very interesting to hear what you said, and thanks for bringing to us the reality of the region, of the Pacific region. I think it's the examples that you gave us are the examples that you gave are pretty impressive, right? Because we know of the vulnerability that the Pacific Island states have to climate, but then also thank you so much for giving us examples of things that are being done, as the review of the WASH Master Plan in new, or the fact, or the examples of the recovering packages helping bridge the climate priorities, as the ones in the area of water resources management. Thank you so much also for underlining the importance of cross-sectoral engagement, but also for restating what Nita was saying, that infrastructure is not enough, that we need a good enabling environment, sound policies, regulations, coordination, and etc. So thank you so much. I think this was very rich.
Thank you.
Maintenant, je passe à Madame Bragori. Madame Bragori, chère Hélène.
Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Dragori. Dear Hélène, thank you for being with us. Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. Happy New Year, by the way. Yes, to you too. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Dear Ellen, in Côte d'Ivoire, the water resources and sanitation ministers have recently championed water, sanitation, and hygiene in such a way as to ensure that the WASH sector is well coordinated and receives consistent public funding over the period 2021-2023. Working in such a coordinated way, I'm really sorry, actually, I have this presentation in English and I'm translating it into French, so I'm translating on the fly. So, as I was saying, working in such a coordinated way, the minister's advocacy work was very effective, and it was a very effective tandem with the triple crisis: health, economic, climate crisis. Do you think that this tandem could be potentially be extended to address in a coordinated way both the COVID and the climate crisis, while fostering green growth in the country. Could you maybe give us some examples? Thank you. Thank you so much for this question. Thank you again, and have a happy new year. And to all the people that are following us today, I wish the same. Thank you very much to SWA for inviting us today, because this way of working is really very productive. We had a meeting in Costa Rica that really launched this way of working, and you said it earlier. The three ministers are working hand in hand. In Costa Rica, by the way, the minister already took the floor and announced that he wanted to get involved, and this process has started already, because we really need to work on sanitation, water, and hygiene with a very efficient way of using our resources. So our Minister for Water, our Minister for Sanitation as well, have decided to present this idea. But what is also very interesting in our context is the fact that the budget was presented hands in hand with the Ministry of Environment as well. So as you said, there is this tandem going on. On the one hand, we have resources that have been announced by the sanitation and water ministers, and on the other hand, we have a very good management that is done with the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. So these two pillars are working very closely together. So we have this connection that is already made. We have this link between water and sanitation and climate. So this green growth, this green recovery that you were mentioning, this is happening already, because both ministries were represented in Glasgow at a COP26 conference. And the solutions have been presented already to coordinate better their actions. So I think that the success of this tandem is very promising. I think it is going to work really well. It should work really well. And we also have the tandem that you mentioned earlier. On the one hand, the ministry responsible for water, and on the other hand, the minister responsible for hydraulic matters are working also hand in hand. And there is a financing by the World Bank that is in place already. And that is why we can really tackle all these problems together. So both tandems are working really well. So to really have an impact on this triple crisis, health, economic, and climate crisis, I think it is really important for all these ministers to work in a cross-sectorial manner. And this is something that we're already doing today. And I think this is going to help tackle the COVID crisis. At the beginning of the COVID crisis, we had financing for sanitation, but it was reduced to solve the problems connected to the COVID crisis. And today, our health ministry is working with the sanitation ministry. So you see, we already found ways to solve both crises working hand in hand. So basically killing two birds with one stone. And this work has been carried out between those two ministries, sanitation and health ministries. When it came to the COVID crisis, they decided to organize meetings, and we also had a delegation of the World Bank that decided to intervene and to meet with us. And one of the group that they have set up is going to help us write a document on a strategy to solve the COVID crisis and the sanitation issues that have occurred because of this crisis. So again, we created many connections with the different sectors that are involved in this crisis. And this is how we managed to get good results. The tandem, sanitation, and water and forestry ministries allowed us to really have a good management of the crisis, because otherwise it would be very difficult for the populations to get an access to drink water. And that is why we need to manage this crisis really well. These two ministries are working together. And the next step is for the ministry in charge of sanitation is working closer together with the health ministry. And I think if we manage to reach good results in that collaboration, I think we can reduce the harmful effects of the crisis, because the COVID crisis is tightly connected to the sanitation crisis, especially for the most vulnerable populations. For us, this would be an ideal situation to have this cross-sectorial work between the ministries so that they can really be advocates for these topics. This is work that has already started, as I said, but allow me to add that today we have already and also received funds from our budget ministry for sanitation, because the sanitation ministry has decided to allocate funds to a higher level, because due to climate change, we also had to face flooding in Abidjan. A lot of people, unfortunately, were casualties of this crisis and passed away. And that is why we ask for more financing to solve this problem. This financing was granted by the ministry in charge for budget and by the government. So this was a very positive news. I don't know if I have answered your question, but this is what I wanted to present to you. This is the situation in Côte d'Ivoire today. And I think the situation, we're doing pretty good, actually. We're doing pretty well, because we want to work in a consistent way to find solutions to the crisis that we are faced with. And we want to reach our objectives. We want to reach our goals, the goals that we've set in the Agenda 2030. And we hope to get the funding for that. And this is also really important to us, dear Katarina. I would like to thank you all, and I would like to really thank the SWA initiative. Thank you so much for the work you've been doing, because you really help us to be advocates and to plea in front of the ministries to have a better access to sanitation and to water, especially in a situation like the one that we have seen in the past few months, where you really have to advocate for a higher budget for sanitation and water. And the work, the documents that you share with us really help us to do that. So when we decide that we need more funding for sanitation, we already have all the good arguments, the valid arguments that we can present to the government if we want to present it in front of the Senate or the Parliament. And thanks to all the documents that we have access to, the minister presented a budget to to Parliament and to the Senate, and that is why we managed to have such a good access to funding. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hélène. Thank you for this presentation. And thank you for presenting the different connections between what is happening in the SWA meetings. You know, what was happening in Costa Rica, the fact that you had first a tandem between the sanitation minister and the water and forestry resources minister. This is the first group that worked together. And then another tandem, as you said, on managing water resources with the sanitation minister and the health minister. So it's actually not a tandem anymore. It's a tandem with 3 different ministers, right? So as you said, this allows to get really good results, and this is a proper cross-sectorial approach that has to then be presented to the budget ministry. Thank you so much for also mentioning the role and the impact of the SWA in this advocacy initiative, and the fact that you mentioned the arguments that we have already set up to the Senate, to the Parliament. And this is really helpful to know also that the work that we're doing as a group gives us the right arguments to plea in favor of water and sanitation in front of the Parliament. One more question. What are the next actions that are going to be taken to reinforce this tandem that you have mentioned, water, sanitation, and environment?
J'en ai un peu parlé. Ce sera maintenant de travailler un peu plus sur le ministre en charge de la santé.
A little bit more with the minister that is in charge of health. And we're having this tandem with the health ministry, and also to the hygiene ministry, and also the issue of health that has to do with COVID. At a short term, I think this is an important point that we have to tackle. And in terms of the next meeting, the minister was not invited. So I saw the invitation of the Ministry of Health, but this is not the place to do so. But the Ministry of Water and Forestry. So thank you very much for having mentioned that. I'll talk to my colleagues that are in charge of that. They are here and they are going to monitor this. So what I wanted to tell you is that you have to practice all your skills of persuasion with the Ministry of Health to come with you at Jakarta. So thank you very, very much, Hélène.
I will move now, I will switch now again into English. So there was a question, let me tell you that there was a question by one organization regarding the economic return of investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene. My colleagues in the Secretariat put the answer in the chat, but let me repeat that water. Sorry. Okay, maybe you can mute yourselves because I'm hearing some echo. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, we put an answer in the chat, but I mentioned in my initial intervention that there was research by WaterAid showing that each dollar invested in water, sanitation, and hygiene could generate up to a $21 return. And there is also analysis showing that giving every home a toilet connected to a safely managed sewage or off-main system could generate $86 billion in wealth a year. But we put that in the chat. Also, there was somebody asking whether how was I saying, whether the sector ministers meeting will be in Jakarta or in Bali, and the answer is Jakarta. So it will be indeed in Jakarta. Are there any other questions from anyone, or maybe I missed them, I didn't see them? Okay. let me emphasize then that and taking and bearing in mind what all the speakers said, that what everyone said was that business as usual will not work, and we need to bring other actors on board, and we need to get into their dialogues, integrate water, sanitation and hygiene there. Now, also the other way around, we need to bring those working on health, on the environment, on the economy, we need to bring them into our discussions. And we need to frame our discussions in such a manner that is also interesting to them, that makes them, that prompts them to action. And what we often say at the SWA Secretariat is that what we do as a partnership is reaching up to higher levels of power, but also we reach out to other sectors. And this is precisely what we are doing with this SMN. We are doing a deliberate effort in reaching out to other sectors. This will not be possible without your help. You will be the ones who will be able to play a critical role in bringing other sectors to the meeting, in making sure that the ministers responsible for water, sanitation and hygiene convince their peers working on climate, working on health, working in the economy, bringing them to the room, bringing them to Jakarta. Look, since there were no other questions, maybe I will use our resource people here, who are, maybe you click on the other, how do you call it, slide? I think their names appeared in the next slide. I will bring in, no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I will bring in our resource people who are here today, and these people are Jose Gesti Canuto, who is our climate advisor of the Secretariat, as well as Alex Knezovic, who is the private sector representative on our steering committee. So maybe very quickly to you, Jose, related, and a question on climate, obviously on climate change. So in relation to water, sanitation and hygiene, can you help us reflect on things that we are learning from the COVID pandemic response that can be applied to climate action? Jose, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Thank you very much for allowing some insights on respect to this, because indeed I see multiple parallels that can be drawn between the COVID-19 and the climate crisis. And it's very interesting to see how the discussion today is already taking us in this direction. The first reflection on these parallels between COVID-19 and the climate crisis is, as I said, the first reflection is that global challenges require massive collaboration. And we have seen this so well explained by our speaker from Cote d'Ivoire, right? The COVID-19 pandemic has taken us all by surprise, and we are now 2 years into this global crisis. And in some places, we can somehow start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if this is true, it's because of massively coordination actions across the world, right? We can also see how this crisis has produced positive outcomes for the WA sector, with a renewed commitment for the importance of water, sanitation and hygiene services. So climate change is a crisis that we have seen actually coming not in the last 2 years or by surprise, but indeed we've seen this coming for the past 20 years at least. And we know that rising sea levels and temperature increases do not follow climate conference timelines or election cycles. And it is time now for international collaborative efforts to build the resilience and adapt to the consequences of a warming planet, as we know. So while shutting down the borders and restricting travel, you have alluded to that, Katerina, with our first speaker, you know, how that has really taken down the economy in the Pacific Islands and across the world, obviously. So and this has been useful, right, to postpone the spread of the COVID-19. It has been, again, building on this collaboration. It's been this collaboration with neighbors and with partners, really, that it's helping us going through this crisis. And such collaboration is essential when it comes to the borderless crisis of climate change. So this is indeed something that I find is a parallel issue between the two crises, right? We have right now an opportunity in front of us as countries work on the recovery plans to also build on their adaptation needs and the climate national adaptation plans. And obviously water sanitation and hygiene needs to be a core part of both of climate planning and recovery planning. And second, just very quickly, let me add, that another similarity or parallel is that I see is that preparation is key, and preparation saves lives with the COVID pandemic, and preparation saves lives in anticipation of the impacts of climate change. And we cannot just go with reactionary action that may have, and it has negative side effects. We need to prepare long-term, insight-driven, and cross-sector planning. Recovery plans and climate plans must cover, obviously right now we need to emphasize that both need to address the net zero growth and need to ensure the resilience of investments. And this clearly applies to water sanitation and hygiene in the aftermath of this global pandemic. And we need to ensure that wash systems and services are resilient, but also contribute to build community resilience to the impacts of climate change, and also due diligence, and they contribute to lower emissions as much as possible. So the second reflection is this: preparation, understanding of climate risk, and moving that. And let me finish super quick.
Jose, we don't have time.
Oh, thanks.
We don't have time. We have
all
3
right,
minutes.
we're finishing. Right.
Sorry, we have 3 minutes, and then we have still 2 speakers. So thank you so much, and apologies. I will very quickly move to you, Alex. The references to circular economy and green growth are surely gaining momentum, we know. What does this mean for WASH, and how can countries articulate that WASH is central for sustainable development and green growth? I'm very sorry. Can you do it in 1.5 minutes?
Yes, of course, Katerina, thank you. Yeah, certainly. I mean, in short, I think it's really encouraging, actually, for WASH. As we look at WASH holistically, we see the relevance towards these other areas of focus, like circular economy and green growth. When we look at the waste, the information, the opportunities for resources within the sanitation and water systems, we see incredibly relevant value to these other global movements and global goals. And so I think particularly as we look ahead to the SMM and to other future events and global conversations around this, it's an opportunity for our sector, for the stakeholders here in countries and also, in the private sector, in research and learning, and really across the board and across SWA's constituencies, to look at how our messages and our work are relevant for these conversations, how we have solutions that can help them accelerate progress on those other goals. So really having those collaborative conversations, looking at WASH from a very holistic context, not just access, but also what are the resources flowing through this system, and then focusing on the value and the solutions that can bring to the global conversation.
Super, Alex. Thank you so much. And thank you for that less than 90 seconds. And without further ado, I'll hand over immediately to Paul Deverell from FCDO for concluding remarks. Paul, over to you.
Okay, well, thanks to Katerina and SWA for organizing this. Really important. I reckon we've probably got representatives from maybe 20 African countries and maybe up 10, a dozen from Asia. So some key points. The first thing, the take homes. The first thing is that this meeting is incredibly relevant, bringing together the WASH and the health and the economic sectors with climate to focus on this triple crisis, or as you put it, I think, the triple win. That's a really good way of looking at it. The points made by the African Development Bank are pretty inspirational when it comes to the focus on the poor. The points made by Amit really highlighted the importance of small island developing states in the Pacific and their acute vulnerability. And what an inspirational talk as well from Helene in Côte d'Ivoire. And I mean, she's been a bit of a champion, and a great example of how SWA makes a genuine impact, and not only in 2019, but I bet in 2022 as well. So really important examples of collaboration between the sectors. So we're going to have to invest now in the preparation for this meeting. And that's what the next step is, to bring together the right stakeholders to ensure ministers are properly briefed, to ensure that ministries of environment or climate have compelling reasons to be there and some active objectives to go for. And I look forward to seeing MAM commitments made, not just for the WASH sector, but also especially the ones which cross over into the health and the climate sector. So great start. We've got a lot of work to do. So let's get on and do it. And back to you, Katerina.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your call to action. And thanks to everyone for participating, for listening in, for the comments that you made, the interventions. And as Paul was saying, now it's the moment where we start doing the work at country level, mobilizing partners, mobilizing ministers, promoting weeks of action, preparing country overviews, working with other stakeholders to define new commitments under the mutual accountability mechanism that, as Paul said, shouldn't just be related to water, sanitation and hygiene, but should reach out to other sectors. So we are looking forward to continuing to working with you. Thank you for having been here, and reach out to us, to our colleagues, if there is anything that you need. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of day. Thank you.